So let me begin with something that I don't get to say to a lot of churches when I come talk to them about their finances. So I'm going to begin with this. We are a generous church. Now the numbers I'm going to show you are all based on through June of 2019, because that's the set of books that was complete when we started. Then I took July of 2018 through the end of the year and said if we do exactly what we did last year, this is how it would come out. And that's why I can tell you that we are a generous church. We will receive almost $1.6 million in contributions. That's people making donations to the operations of the ministry of the church. CEC is the Christian Education Center. That's our school program. They will have given some $265,000 to the ministries of Christ Church. That doesn't count the $65,000 they gave over and above in July as a gift. So this gives you an idea of how much income we receive from that. Earned income is a category that kind of covers building use fees and things like that. Money we receive just kind of sporadically as people make use of our facilities and reimburse the church for that. Ministries revenue is a bit of a hodgepodge of things. A lot of ministries revenue is a pass-through. So if our youth go on a ski trip, let's say, and we need to collect all of their money to pay the deposit, the money goes into ministries revenue and then it goes out to make the deposit. Also, some designated gifts go into ministries revenue. So if somebody writes a check to Puppet Ministry, it will come in through this category and go out to Puppet Ministry. So that's ministries revenue. Faith Promise is a great ministry of the church. It is a ministry that helps to financially support 13 different ministries beyond the walls of our church. The way Faith Promise works is at the beginning of the year, families make a pledge to support these 13 ministries. This last year, we received $79,000 in pledges. Every dollar of Faith Promise comes through the offering plate to those ministries, with one exception. We use Faith Promise dollars to pay for the cost of the annual Faith Promise missions fair, which is usually held in January. So that, again, is a designated gift, and it's kind of a pass-through for us. Roots and Wings is our capital campaign. All I did, this was a 3-year campaign for Roots and Wings. I took the total amount of money pledged and divided it by 3 and said this is what we would receive on an annual basis. It probably won't come in exactly this way, but as a reflection of the generosity of the congregation, I think it's a pretty good representation. So here's the thing that's exciting and confounding at the same time. We will have received more than $2.6 million in gifts through our congregation, through your giving. We have a $2.1 million budget, and we're struggling to make our budget. There's a reason for that. We have a high percentage of our giving that goes to designated and restricted gifts. So a lot of that is a function of having a capital campaign. Money given to the capital campaign doesn't go to the general fund or anything like that. But part of it, too, is we have people that love particular ministries in the church and they want to be absolutely sure that they are well funded. So they may write a check for $1,000 and put youth ministry in it because they really want to support the youth. Or they may do that for children's ministry or any other number of things. Well, those are designated and restricted gifts, and we cannot use them for anything but that for which it was designated. All churches have designated and restricted gifts. But this is a high percentage of designated and restricted gifts, and that's usually a symptom of something, and it's one of the reasons we're having this conversation. When churches have high percentage of designated and restricted gifts, oftentimes it's an indication that people are not completely confident about the places where the money is being spent. And so they want to make sure that the ministries that they're passionate about are supported, and they designate those gifts. The good news is, generosity is not our problem. It isn't. We'll receive $2.6 million in giving from this congregation, and that is fantastic. It's just that the way that the giving is coming in. Truth be told, we don't need an increase in giving to make our budget. We need to change some of the way the money is given. Now, let me be clear. If you want to increase your giving, that's okay with us. We'll certainly allow that. Thad, we'd allow people to increase their giving, wouldn't we?
Amen.
We would, okay. But I say to you again, this is a generous congregation. And that's what gives me hope that we can begin to change some things and turn some things around. So how is our money spent? I want you to look at the pie chart there, and I want you to pay attention, especially if you have the piece of paper. You'll notice up on here, there's a category in the lower left-hand corner that says $183,000 of fixed ministry expenses. I want to explain that first. There are certain ministries of the church that require the same things across the board. Worship, mission, student, youth, all those things, they require pastoral support, right? So we took the cost of all of your pastors and divided it among each and every one of these ministries' areas as part of the cost of that ministry. They all need utilities and electricity, so we did the same thing and divided it out for every category. The debt service, we took and divided it amongst all the ministries' area. So included in every number is that $108,000. So where you $83,000. So where you see $406,000 for worship, that includes $183,000 of fixed ministry expenses. So let's look at how our money is spent. It makes sense, and it's a good thing, that our single largest category for ministry is worship. Now, we're talking only about dollars given to the operating budget. From here on out, we're not talking about restricted or designated gifts. These are just gifts to the ministries of Christ Church United Methodist. So we spend $406,000 on worship, and that is the highest percentage of any category of ministry, and that makes sense. Worship is what we do. The next two categories, and I think it's good and fitting that they are also the next two largest, are children and student ministries. Now you'll notice in children's ministries they receive 18% of the giving, and student ministries receive 16%. That's a good sign, and the reason is oftentimes churches have one ministry or the other getting way much more support. Like, for example, children's ministry gets some 30% and student ministry gets 10%. But we have it balanced. And in fact, the delta, the difference between student ministry and children's ministry, quite frankly, is the cost of the nursery. If you took the nursery cost out, we spend almost the exact same amount on children as we do students. That's one of the reasons we have such strong children and youth ministries, is because this church has made those things a priority. And we see that week after week after week reaching people. Missions. Now, keep in mind, we're only talking about money given to Christ Church United Methodist. So Faith Promise is not included in this number. This number includes the $183,000 of fixed ministry expenses and our apportionments, money that we give to the denomination that they send out and use for ministries all over the world. So that's what missions is. Communications, that's our web hosting, that's all of our mailings, that's any of our advertising, that's to pay for a staff person who leads our communications ministries. That's what that is. Pastoral care, that is the $183,000 of ministry support and another $10,000 of miscellaneous things. But basically that's Pastor Melinda, Pastor Mark, and myself. And then adult ministry, you'll notice they get the smallest amount, and there's a reason for that. Most adults pay for their own stuff, right? If a Sunday school class wants to order books, they pretty much pay for them themselves. And truth be told, like most churches, a large portion of what we do is geared towards adults anyway. And so that's why when you see what's actually specifically designated, it doesn't look like it's getting much support. We have a capital campaign, the Roots and Wings Capital Campaign, and many of you are supporting that. It's a 3-year campaign that comes to a close this mid-November. We had pledges of $1.67 million for Roots and Wings. This is to help pay for the new Christian Education Center building. We have received to date, and this is through June of 2019 actuals, $1.3 million. That is an outstanding payout rate for this point of the campaign. And again, it speaks to the generosity of this congregation, which I think is a real strength. We have, as of June of 2019, $328,000 in pledges outstanding. That's people who've made pledges, are paying on their pledges, and will continue to pay that out through the end of the year. Now, there's a piece I wanted to lift up because not everybody is clear on it, and I just wanted to share it with you. We have a fantastic loan, and I'm going to go over the loan terms in just a moment. But one of our agreements to get this loan was that we would have received some $1.5 million in paid pledges by November 15th. We're on track to hit that number, but if you're someone who's making payments on your pledge, I want to ask a favor. If it does not materially impact you to complete your pledge by November 15th, to help us hit that $1.5 million, that would be most helpful. Now, some families, they time their gifts for tax purposes, for tax efficiency. And some families may be waiting till the end of the year to pay their pledge, and then they want to pay it off on January 1st, 2020. We want you to keep going with those plans if those are your plans, because we don't want this to materially impact you on a negative way. But if you can complete your pledge by November 15th, it would really help us in maintaining our current loan terms. Let me show you our loan. We have a long-term debt of $7.4 million. So 5.2 of that is the cost of the Christian Education Center. And the rest of it is debt that is rolled into the one debt together. So the terms are very favorable. We actually have a 25-year note, and I will tell you, it is rare for a church to get a 25-year term. I sat on the board of HeartSpring Foundation, which is one of the groups that makes loans to churches. We never gave a loan more than 20 years. We have a fixed rate of 4.4% for the first 7 years of the loan. Then it will adjust to based on whatever prime is at the moment. So for 7 years, and that clock starts in June of next year, we will be locked in at 4.4%. Our debt service, beginning June of next year, will increase by $12,000 a month as we make principal payments. That means that we'll need an additional $72,000 either cut out of next year's budget or raised by giving in order to handle the additional debt service. So here's our present situation as I see it. We are in a tight cash flow situation. Now, we are just coming out of the summer. Every church is in a tight cash flow situation. But ours is tight for other reasons as well. And I want to show you some of the symptoms that I see of a church that's in tight cash flow. First of all, we live out of our line of credit by about $60,000. In other words, we carry a balance consistently of about $60,000 out of our line of credit. So that's an indication to me that money is tight. We also have spent about $105,000 in designated and restricted funds on operating expenses. Let me flesh that out a little bit and explain what that means. All of our giving, all of the money that passes through the church goes to the same checking account, right? And the bills come through, including designated gifts. A designated or a restricted gift really should only go towards that ministry it was designated to support. We have the money to honor every request. We carry that $105,000 as a debt. If there were a run on the bank and every ministry that had designated gifts went to Thad on Monday and said, we want to pay for our stuff right now, we could write every check and we would still be in business. We might be making greater use of our line of credit to do so, but we could honor those obligations. That's good that we can do that, but that's not best practices. We really need to be serious about paying those funds back and segregating them from operating, and we're going to talk a little bit about the way we can move in that direction. We are no longer paying 100% of our apportionments. We're paying about 68% of our apportionments right now. So that was to cover some staffing costs that weren't anticipated or some needs that needed to be filled, but that's where we are. We're not paying our apportionments. I also want you to know we had $74,000 in unplanned expenses this year that kind of hurt. Many of you know that we had the lightning strike that fried a lot of our electrical stuff. Well, it was covered by insurance with a $10,000 deductible, but we had one uncovered item. There's a piece of technology in our fire alarm system that helped our old building talk to our new building. It also got destroyed as a result of the lightning strike. Replacing that equipment is an improvement and not a repair, so it was not covered. So that was $40,000 that we did not anticipate in the budget. How do you plan for a lightning strike? We also had a contract with an energy company. It was deemed to be financially advantageous to end that contract this year. The cost to end that contract was some $18,000. It was discovered that we were out of compliance with the Affordable Care Act back in 2016. We were facing tens of thousands of dollars in fines. The money that UC spent here was the cost of hiring someone to help us get out of that situation without paying those fines. And finally, that last category are some unplanned staff and some audio-visual repair and some things like that. But all told, that adds up to a $74,000 strain on our budget, which helps add to our tight cash flow situation. So we're in an unsustainable situation. You know, we're a 28-year-old church, so if you think about a young couple, we're like a young family that lives paycheck to paycheck. We've maxed out our credit cards, and our friends and our family are tired of us asking for money. That would be y'all, right? So what does a family do in that situation? Just what we're doing now. We sit around the kitchen table and we say, where's our money going? How much money do you think we're going to have? And what can we do to reverse this situation? And that's part of what's beginning with this conversation. It's already started with the Finance Committee, but we're bringing it to you now. So, one of the things we did after we got an understanding of where we were is we formed a Strategic Finance Committee. This team was made up of Gil as chair of the board, myself as lead pastor, Amy Mitchum as head of the Christian Education Center, the chair of PPR committee, the chair of trustees, and our lay leader. We sat down over a couple of sessions for a few hours, and we began to look at our revenue and our spending, and to come up with a plan to get out of this situation and stay out of this situation while continuing to maintain the ministries of our church. And what we've done is we've come up with a 3-year strategy of how we can get ourselves straightened out. So here's the pathway to financial strength that we're looking at. First of all, we need complete financial transparency within the congregation. I will have to stand in front of you every quarter and open the books and answer your questions, okay? So you'll know what I know, or you'll be as ignorant as I am, whichever it is it works out to be, but we'll all be on the same page together. We must make $72,000 available in fiscal 2020 to handle our increasing debt service. That's not optional. The people at Prosperity Bank are very nice people, but they want their money. And so we're going to have to make that payment. We should get out of our line of credit, and I'd like for us to do that over a 2-year period by making $30,000 available either by expense cuts or increased revenue so that we can begin to work out of that situation. And we need to make a good faith effort and begin first steps to paying back our restricted funds. And we would like to begin with a $10,000 payment back into that next year. For this to happen, we would need to increase our giving or cut our expenses, or some variation of those things, by $112,000. I make this commitment to you. We're hitting that $112,000, even if we have to hit every dollar of it by cutting, because it's better to do it now while we have time to do it than to do something more drastic in the future. We're in an unsustainable situation. We're healthy. We're strong. But we need to begin to make some changes in order to continue to stay that way. So I have some good news for you. We've discovered some things that have already helped us get towards that goal. On the expense side, we've learned a couple of things. First of all, we spend $16,000 a year advertising for Christmas and Easter. We're not doing any advertising until we're balancing our budget. The trustees, working with Bob Cooper, who knows utility bills backwards and forwards, have studied it together, and we have discovered that if we close the church 2 nights a week after 5 o'clock, it will save us $18,000 a year, and that's just on utilities. We've already talked to the groups that meet on Tuesdays and Fridays. We are going to close the church on Tuesdays and Fridays. In fact, we're moving in that direction now. So there's $34,000. We had a position come open, and we switched it from full-time to part-time, and have already recruited a complete volunteer team to make up the difference, and that saves us $10,000. The Christian Education Center is going to increase their giving to this church. They've already started it, and it will add another $22,000 that we did not have last year. In addition to that, we will relamp the sanctuary this year with unspent facilities money, and it will save the church $9,000 a year. I can honestly say, because I ran these numbers by Thad, who really doesn't want me to ever be happy. I ran them by Thad. We have a hard number of already finding $92,000 of the 112. So if we have any kind of giving increase after the stewardship campaign, we'll be well on our way. Now that's good news, but I need you to hear the whole picture. This $112,000 that we're hitting in 20, we have to hit another $112,000 in 2021, because then we have an entire year of debt service, right? And then we have to continue forward from there. And before you get too excited about that, I also have to say, if everything goes well and we are successful, at the end of a 3-year period, we will be at zero. We will not have any money set aside for a catastrophic mechanical failure. We won't have any money set aside if we want to pursue a ministry dream that needs resourcing. But it's the right steps to take. And I'm confident that while this is a problem, with complete financial transparency, a commitment to reach these goals, and a plan developed by your leadership, we're going to get there. Now, one of the conversations that I've had with people as I got on board with our church was, why don't we do another capital campaign to eliminate the debt? So I'm looking at all the options. I called the people that helped lead your last capital campaign, and they told me, Pastor Powers, we would implore you not to put this church through another capital campaign. A lot has been asked of them. They are tired and wore out, and they need a break. Now, mind you, this is coming from people who make a living doing capital campaigns, telling me not to do a capital campaign. So taking that idea out of my mind is kind of what led to this process. We're going to be a church with long-term debt. If we really wanted to get out of debt with a capital campaign, well, a capital campaign to reduce debt will usually only raise 1 to 1.5 times your giving to the church over a 3-year period. Your giving is $1.6 million. Our last capital campaign raised $1.6 million. If the pattern held true, we'd have to have a capital campaign, a 3-year capital campaign every year for 12 years to retire the debt. And I just don't think that's a healthy approach for the church. A better approach is to align our giving, operating expenses together, learn how to live with a sustainable debt. Now, if we grow to a point where it's reasonably possible to retire the debt with a capital campaign somewhere in the future, we can be open to that possibility. But if we were to have a capital campaign in 2 or 3 years, it wouldn't be to retire the debt. It might be to fix something that's broken. But you know what I'd love to see happen? And I just want to bounce this idea off of you. Let's say we have a capital campaign in 2 or 3 years, and we raise another $1.6 million. I would love to take $250,000 of that and put it in a sink fund to handle any crisis. I'd like to take another $250,000 and put it in our checking account for what we call seasonal liquidity, so that we can take from that money beginning in March when we start to burn cash, through October when we stop burning cash, and then pay it back at the end of the year. The rest of that $1.1 million due for the upgrade and upkeep of the church, carpet that needs to be replaced or furnishings and that sort of thing. I'm not planning to do that. I'm just saying if there's a capital campaign, I think that would be the right way to go. When I talk to a congregation about giving, I'm not trying to raise a budget. I'm trying to grow disciples. Now, it says somewhere in the Bible that the pastor can only talk about money 3 Sundays in October. I'm not sure where it says that, but it's adhered to so much that I assume that it's just as strong as Judgment Day. So if I only get 3 Sundays in October to talk about money, we're talking about money. But I want to tell you how I talk about money. To me, giving to the church is not about raising a budget. Giving is a spiritual discipline. Just like prayer and fasting and service and worship and acts of charity, when we give faithfully, it changes our hearts, and just like everything else, we become more and more like Jesus, which is the transformation we all strive for. So with giving as a spiritual discipline, I teach the tithe, giving a tenth, as a model, a biblical model for what it looks like to give. So when I say that to Methodists, they start getting really nervous and they think, oh no, the bishop done sent us a Baptist, he's talking about the tithe. Because most Methodists don't give 10%. Truth be told, most Methodists only give 2 or 3% of their income to the church, and there's a reason for that. It's because we as your pastors have not taught it properly. So when I talk about tithing and growing to a tithe, I will say to the congregation, look at your giving and look at your income and divide one end to the other and see where you are. And don't feel bad if you're at 2 or 3%. It just means you're a Methodist, is all that means. And I don't teach people jump to a tithe. When we give, it should never produce anxiety or fear. I don't want anyone turning in a pledge card feeling anxious or resentful or worried. So what I teach is, if you're giving at 3%, prayerfully consider growing to 4%. And then grow from there and commit to growing towards a tithe over time. Now you need to know, I'm not a prosperity gospel preacher. I don't teach that if you give $1 to the church, God will give you $10 on the back end somehow. That's not what happens when we're faithful with our giving. But I will tell you what does happen. When we're faithful with our giving, by the grace of God, we begin to experience a sense of peace about our money and our possessions. And you know, most people don't even know what that's like. You know, there's, broadly speaking, two kinds of people in the world. There's people with lots of money and that are wealthy in the world. You know what they think about most of the time? How to get more money and keep their money. And then there's people that don't have enough money in the world that have trouble making an ends meet. And you know what they think about most of the time? How to get more money and keep more money. We all worry about it. Jesus spoke about money and possessions more than anything else in the New Testament other than the kingdom of God. And the reason for that is this. He knew that we would struggle with it. He does not want us to worry about money. There's so many other important things that we do have to worry about. My hope is that you'll come and be part of the stewardship campaign in October. It's the last 3 Sundays in October. I give fair warning that we're going to talk about money, and I'd be disappointed to see the attendance go down because people don't want to be part of that. But you show yourselves to be leaders in this church by your presence here tonight. So I hope you'll come and be a part of that, and that we'll help grow together so that in our homes we don't worry about money, and in our church we don't worry about money. Because when we can stop worrying about money, we can start talking about other things, right? Like kids who don't have enough to eat and people who don't know Jesus. Those are the things we need to be talking about. So that's just my approach to giving in church. If there's something you didn't get to ask tonight, you have questions, I want you to reach out to Thad or myself or Gil or anybody on finance. There's no reason to be uninformed. We'll tell you everything you want to know. Thank you again for being here tonight. We appreciate you being here.